Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Trust Factor. This is the podcast that guarantees your success when you implement its divine age-old teachings. This week's speaker is Rabbi Shlomo Blackman. If you're a Toronto Jew, you know him. You've seen him around. You maybe haven't seen him in the limelight, in the spotlight. He's not that guy. He's not the guy who's all over the place in your face. He's the guy who's in the background getting things done. He is the guy who's a mover and a shaker. He's not a guy who talks too much. On the contrary, he doesn't like to talk a lot. That's my experience with him, at least, that if you want to talk about important matters, he can have a great conversation with you. But at the end of the day, his preference is to be active, is to be the one taking action and getting things done. Often involved in youth programmings, dealing with children in their teens and tweens, 20s, university, post-university. That's where he focuses a lot of his effort and energy through Aish Torah. I've seen him involved in Olami. These are organizations that are outreach organizations for the most part, and they're designed to help bring people closer to spirituality and to God. And so if we're going to talk to anybody who deals with the next generation, the up and coming, what we're going to expect or what we can expect from previous generations, he's going to share some great insight, I'm sure. That's coming up this Friday, my friends. I'm looking forward to it, as should you be. Yesterday, we said that death and dying is a huge natural motivator. And it's true. I didn't make that up. We all know this to be true. The fear of death and dying is a motivator to remind you that the clock is ticking, that we aren't sure what tomorrow brings. And so we have to act today. We have to remember that the days are numbered. This is a temporary existence. But the smart money, the smart individual, the one who has their head on properly, and really our goal is to make an effort so that we naturally have the same motivation for life and living as that of death and dying. And we can do that. If we apply ourselves correctly, my friends, we are able to take the motivation that we get from fear of death and dying and apply it to life and living. That's not an easy task because we're not programmed that way. But if you want to get there, the biggest assistance that you can get, the biggest advantage that anybody can give you is the subject matter upon which we are conversing. The concept that there is a God and that he runs the world and that he is perfect and that he lacks nothing, and that most of all, he is our Heavenly Father and he wants a relationship with us. He wants to be intimately involved in our lives. If you don't know what I'm talking about, if this sounds alien to you, the only way for you to figure this out is to stretch your neck out a little bit and experience God for yourself. Speak to him. Use your words when you're driving to work in the morning, when you're coming home at night, when you're alone at home and you've got a few minutes. Shut everything down, look up to the heavens, use your own words, have a conversation. Say thank you for all the things that you've received and that you're going to receive. And then tell them about the things that you would like, that you think would allow you to be able to build your relationship with him, to be able to succeed in this life in a way that is good and proper, and not in a way that the secular world believes or defines success. Have that conversation and then step aside, because what that conversation does, my friends, is it opens up a pinhole. Remember we said, God says, open up a pinhole and I will open up a hole for you the size of an auditorium. Open that pinhole, and the way to open it is to have a conversation. It's not hard. It's not difficult. It's not some magic recipe. It's not some secret formula. All you need to do is acknowledge him. Demonstrate a desire to connect back. That's it. You don't have to be a high-level spiritual guru. You don't have to be a Torah scholar. You don't have to be any of these things. You don't even have to be a good person. You hear this? You don't even have to be a good individual. You could be rotten at your core. It doesn't matter. God views all of us the same, and he wants us all to be able to connect back to him. In the meantime, we're responsible for the good and the bad that comes from our life based on how we conduct ourselves. So the rotten person is going to live a rotten life. Good person is going to live a good life. That's the consequence of our choices and our actions. But even the rotten person who wants to get back to God, all they need to do is have a conversation, a sincere, heartfelt conversation about where I'm at, where I want to go, where I've come from, acknowledge the past, anticipate the future, and try and connect to Him. That's all it takes, my friends. And then, like I said, step aside and enjoy. Let's finish off what it says in the chapter. It says, if someone would admonish an individual who doesn't have trust in God for his lack of attention to spiritual matters and tell him, how long will you disregard the need to think about your provisions for the next world? When you come to somebody who's got no trust in God and say to him, are you only living for today? Don't you recognize that there is more than just the here and now, that you have to think about what's going to happen later on, what we're here for, what's it all for? What is he going to say? Until I have enough funds saved up for the sustenance and provision of my life, myself, and those who depend on me, my wife, my children, until the end of our days, that's when, only when I've accumulated, when I've amassed a certain sense of comfort and security, then I'll defer. Then I'll switch gears and I'll change my focus. My friends, we've all heard that many times. What he's saying over here is excuses. It's just excuses, and those excuses are always external. They're not in my control. When I buy a bigger house, when I get married, when I have children, when I make my first $1 million, when I get a better job, when I leave this country, when I'm living somewhere else, when I retire, that's when I'll change. That's when I'll start to worry about my other life. Right now, leave me alone. I don't have enough time as it is. I'm working. I'm providing. I'm trying to be a father. I'm trying to be a husband. I'm trying to be a good spouse. I'm trying to be a good child. Whatever, all these things I'm trying to do. And you want me to detract and take away time and energy from that to be able to attribute to the building up of an afterlife that I know nothing about? That's not an easy demand. So number one is learn about it. Number one is, like we said a few days ago, figure out what this world is that we're building up to. Figure out what the world is that we're in right now and what your purpose is and what you should and shouldn't be doing. Figure out who God is and that He exists and that He runs the show and that you want to have a relationship with Him, because that's how you win. And then when you've established all that and it's clear in your mind, then you will know how to reallocate your resources, your time and your energy between this world and the next. But the rest are all excuses. And what does God say about that? There's an unbelievable verse that God says, Al tomar keshe eshne efne shema lo tipane. Don't say that when the time is right, when the stars are aligned, in other words, when all these excuses have been met, then I'll start to do the right thing. Shema lo tipane, because it won't happen. It won't happen. You will never do it. God knows how He programmed us. The more you procrastinate, the more you push things off, the more you delay doing what you know you need to do for whatever reason. Most of the time it's because it's physically or intellectually difficult. But the more you delay it, the less likely you are to actually ever achieve what you've set out to achieve or what you've promised yourself you're going to. That being keeping Torah and mitzvahs, that being investing in your next life, that being investing in your spirituality and your emotional and spiritual growth. We all have to do it, but it's not easy because this world puts so much stress and demand on our time and attention. So don't say when things change, when the situation is better, when I have the better job, when I've made my first $1 million, when I retire, then I'll sit and learn. Then I'll start to do the mitzvahs. Then guess what? Your children are already adults and they've moved on and you haven't done 1% of what you could have done to impact their lives better. Guess what? Your relationships for the last 30, 40, 50 years have suffered because you've been procrastinating and pushing off doing what you're supposed to do for the betterment of you and your family and your community, waiting for that utopia. You cannot and you should not wait, my friends. Now is the time. Strike while you still can. Nobody guarantees you tomorrow. Nobody guarantees you retirement. Nobody guarantees you the millions. Nobody guarantees you any of the things that you would so strongly desire. You can ask. You may not receive. So what are you going to do? Let your life pass you by while you sit and wait for something that may never come? It is a recipe for a failed life, my friends. It's time to pick up today. I'm telling you, as somebody with experience, and you've heard it from my guest speakers, and you're going to continue to hear it from us, the secret recipe to living your best life in this world is having a relationship with your Creator. It gives you the confidence that you need. It gives you all of the power that you need. It gives you wisdom that you need in order to conduct yourself in this life. It gives you all of the right mindsets to be able to thrive and to be able to do what we said at the beginning of this podcast, namely to attribute as much motivation to life and living as we are programmed to attribute to death and dying. And then you really start living. Have an amazing day, my friends. To be continued.